Man.
If you want to get some of the best deer hunting advice, listen to your elders, and that's how I learned a lot about deer hunting. But also tips that I learned from watching those early television and video programs really helped me. One of the biggest ones was bleeding at a deer to get it to stop. When we first started bow hunting back in the early 1980s, we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't know how to get a deer to stop. If a deer was walking through the woods, we just shot at it. And a lot of times you didn't have optimal shot placement. By bleeding with your mouth, you can get that deer to stop. Some people even whistle. They might even bark at the deer just to get that deer to stop. Don't startle it too much so you can get a nice clean shot. But bleeding at a deer to get it to stop, I have found that elicits almost a defensive posture, almost subconsciously by the deer. First thing I want to show you is some anatomy on the deer. When a deer is walking, it's using its scapula and its humerus bone in synchronicity together. That's how the deer's walking. But if you look at this deer here, how we have the example, those bones move with the deer. And when you get that deer to stop, that leg invariably is going forward and coming back, and that scapula is covering its vitals. I think that's by design. That scapula, when that thing pitches back, it's covering the heart and the lungs, and as any bow hunter knows, that's almost impenetrable, depending upon where your shot hits. Gun hunters, not as much. But one thing that I've learned is that when I bleat with my mouth, I know that deer is going to basically move that scapula, move that humerus bone, and almost shift its body toward me almost every time. Not every time, but my gosh, I can set my watch by it. I'm going to keep that in mind when I shoot, especially with crossbow, bow, any archery equipment. I want to have that shot a little bit farther back into the meatier part of the lungs, so to speak, or tuck it nice and low towards the heart. I can get past that humerus bone a lot of times. Like I said, with a gun, it's not as much of an issue because a slug, a rifle bullet is going to destroy that scapula and a lot of times render that deer useless right there. That brachial plexus, that bundle of nerves, once that is the trauma from a bullet, normally drops a deer on the spot. And we've talked about that a lot here in the years of deer and deer hunting. The other thing I want to point out is the scapula isn't the only thing that you have to be concerned about when taking this shot. That humerus bone includes what they call a medial flare. And if you look at the top of that humerus bone where it meets the socket of the scapula, that is a thick, round bone. And when that thing pitches back, guess where it's coming over? It's right in line with the heart. A broadhead can be deflected by that. You know, you got to keep that in mind. So keep in mind, be cognizant of the fact the scapula you want nothing to do with, and if that deer is doing one of these things where it's kind of facing you after you bleat, make sure your point of impact is a little bit farther back, and I always say a little bit lower than the center line, just to be safe. So what does this mean when you're sitting in the blind and you're sitting in the tree stand and that deer comes into range? Again, as we always preach here at Deer and Deer Hunting, take your time, visualize the shot, and put that point of impact where you know is going to give you the best odds of success. If you want to learn more about shot placement, deer anatomy, and deer biology, log on to deeranddeerhunting.com.
So if you're in the market for a new sight, you have to check out the Apex Covert Pro. This thing is a beast if you're looking for a movable sight. What I like about it is not only is it movable, but it has two dots that come up. One's red, one's green. What that does for me is I'm going to sight the first one in at 20 yards. My second one happens to be almost at 35 in my setup. So now I got a 2-pin fixed sight, but if that thing's out anywhere past 35, I can easily dial it, lock it in place, and shoot. I just love it because it's using that ability with that 1-pin lighted sight to shoot all the way out to 100 yards. Now, I know some of you guys worry, how do you sight that thing in? Well, it's super simple. You know, first dial in your first pin, you know, at 20 yards, and then what I like to do is try to go all the way out to, 50, 60, 70 yards. My personal 70 yards. Why I want that distance is I'm gonna lock that in. Once it's in at 70 yards, I'm gonna have a mark where my 20-yard pin was, a mark where my 70-yard pin is, and they supply the tapes in here. It'll have a whole bunch of them. All you have to do is match up and find where your 20-yard mark hits in the 70-yard marks with that same tape. Tape that on there right over the other tape, and it'll be good from all the way out to 100 yards. It is the easiest method out there. I've been shooting it for 3 years, and it also has, a crosshair where it's gonna hit. What I like about that is it's really easy to pick up. It has the ability to dial that light up a little bit higher or put it down. So in low light conditions, you can have it so you can barely see the lighted pin. And what that does is it gives you a great field of view. If you have it too bright, you won't be able to see. It's totally adjustable. This is a great sight for anybody. I absolutely love it. Check out the new Covert Pro from TrueGlow.